Hi guys, it's Janet. I have Dr. Samar along with me from Ohio State, continuing my living room talks. My first question to her, I've heard you say on multiple occasions, the burden of education is not on minorities. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because that was a point of view I haven't heard before.
Yeah, so recently I just want to kind of give a shout out that I was reading White Fragility by Dr. Robin DiAngelo. And so it kind of broadened my perspective and language of what I've experienced my whole life. So by that, I really mean that it's a couple things that happens when you ask someone who's in a marginalized group to explain their experience to you, right? One is insensitive, and it could even be harmful because what you're saying is, I'm not going to acknowledge the experience that you have being part of this group and being oppressed. Instead, I want you to kind of put that aside and take this moment to teach me something. So that's pretty insensitive. Another thing is that it's pretty problematic because what you do in that moment is you really acknowledge and kind of validate that it's okay to have racial ignorance. It's okay for you to claim, well, I don't know anything about this other race, and that to be acceptable to not know anything about a whole group of people. So that's not cool either. And then the last point is that it's kind of hypocritical because what you're saying is that, oh, this is so important to me that I want to learn more about this area, but I don't want to do the work myself. I want you to do the work for me to educate me instead of finding the information on your own because you really care about the topic.
Second part to that question, have you had a lot of peers come up to you asking for your opinion on current events?
I really haven't. I actually brought it up probably more than they have. So I was sitting in meetings and having these Zoom calls, and nobody was talking about it. And I decided this is kind of problematic. We need to acknowledge that some of us are not okay. There are a lot of things going on in the world right now that we shouldn't just ignore, and not just for us as colleagues, but we're in education. So our students are experiencing this. So we shouldn't just try and go along as is, business as usual, because it's not. And so just to be a little bit more considerate in that context, so I really brought it up more than others probably wanted to or were thinking about it maybe in a work context.
And how are you approaching the topic of cultural competency with your colleagues and your students?
So we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And so we had already been talking about trying to incorporate some different things across multiple different curricula within the school. I'm in the School of Health and Rehab Sciences. So that was something that we were already talking about. Our program already does some work, but we realized we were focusing on the last year. It's probably a little too late. So we want to try and have a more intentional approach to start early with cultural competency and incorporate it into everything that we do. And it's not just for AT, but just using AT as an example, your history, that should include some cultural competency, right? So your history taking, when you're doing the exam, when you have a rehab session, pretty much everything that you do, follow-up education, that all should be considerate of the culture of the individual, because that's the only way you can really provide patient-centered care.
I'm going to read a little disclaimer right now. All views and opinions are those of the subject and do not represent the views and opinions of any organization. So your closing statement, next couple minutes, is all yours. What do you want to tell everyone about how you're feeling with current events?
I think it's a little bit of disappointment, of course, because you see all these silent negative feelings that people have been harboring coming to the surface. But then there's also some optimism because a lot more people are interested in having the conversation. And we know that race specifically is a difficult and uncomfortable conversation. And even more so if you are of the dominant culture and you've never been expected to talk about or to really investigate your own race. So it's a really foreign territory for you. So the fact that so many people are willing to kind of take those steps is something that I think is, we can look forward to and hopefully see some long-term change.
Samar, that's all I have for you for today. Thank you so much for doing this, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.